Okay, so what we want to do here is talk about an overrunning event. Just very, very quick, the basic points of it, because it is kind of it's an unusual event if you're not familiar with it. So just to kind of hammer out the points with this particular setup, this particular overrunning event. What we're looking at here is you have this very, very, very large Arctic air mass dropping south over central Canada. We already have cold air in place over much of the northern part of the U.S. As you know, like New England today, obviously, many places are in the 20s. It's even colder back over, the Great Lakes, upper Midwest. But it's really, really cold up in central Canada, where it's, negative 35, negative 40 degrees, just absolutely ridiculous amounts of cold air. And that's going to be dropping southward over the next couple of days as we head towards the weekend. And it's going to cause a situation where you're going to have temperatures 20, 30, even 40 degrees below average in parts of northern Minnesota, the Dakotas, and Montana by the weekend. It won't be quite that far below average in the Northeast, but it will be plenty cold enough as this Arctic air mass starts to usher that air in as we go toward the end of the weekend. And that's very, very significant, because what's going to happen is, as that air mass starts pushing down, there's going to be an Arctic front, and that Arctic front is going to stall somewhere by the end of the weekend. The exact location where it stalls is going to be very, very important, because as bitterly cold and as powerful as this air mass is, we are starting to get toward March now. So the air in the southeast along the Gulf Coast is a little bit warmer. So what's going to happen is, eventually, somewhere probably just south of New England through, let's say, New Jersey, West Virginia, Kentucky, back down along the Ohio River, maybe towards Arkansas, northeast Texas, somewhere in there, the Arctic front is going to stop. And it's going to set up a boundary of bitterly cold air to the north and relatively mild air to the south. It's not warm, it's just it's going to be like 40s and 50s, but considerably warmer than the air that's sitting over, let's say, the upper Midwest, the Great Lakes, and southeastern Canada. And along that Arctic front, because of that very, very large temperature distribution, you're going to have disturbances setting up along this Arctic front. And the disturbances will ride along that front like they're on a train track. The setup at 500 millibar, which is kind of, very, in numbers, savvy, just kind of would take too long to explain without a map or something to show people. I'm just explaining it, by FaceTime here. But essentially, the way it's set up, with the polar vortex plunging over the middle of the continent, it is not conducive at the end of this weekend for a big bombing 980 millibar low to either form, either over, the lakes or the Appalachians off the coast. It's not going to happen. So, but there is energy here, and there is a big gradient between the warm air to the south and the bitterly cold air and the polar vortex. So what is going to happen, particularly as the tail of that Arctic front, the west end of it, gets down toward Arkansas and northeast Texas, it's going to tap into moisture from the Gulf of Mexico. So what's going to happen is you're going to have these little, what they call short waves. They're not quite low pressure systems. They're things that often become low pressure systems, but they're just little pieces of disturbances that will help pick up this Gulf of moisture energy and send it like it's on a train track up through northeast Texas, up into Arkansas, up along the Ohio River, northern Kentucky, southern Ohio, into Pennsylvania, and on into the northeast and in New England. And if you want the snow, you want to be just to the north of wherever this boundary sets up. And the key thing about these overrunning events is they can be very, very long duration. So a lot of storms you get, maybe 12, maybe 18 hours if there's no block and you get a really big storm. But that's about it. Here you could have a situation where the snow lasts in excess of 24, possibly over 36 hours. That might be pushing it with this thing. But it's a very, very long duration event. So what happens is you don't need the snow to be coming down that heavily for it to really pile up. If you have a 24-hour event, it only needs to be snowing at half an inch an hour to get a foot. So it will add up quickly when it just keeps snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing and snowing. And you can easily get a half inch an hour if you are 150, 200 miles north of that front, because the air could be in the teens and the snow ratios will be so high. So you don't need that much precipitation for this type of an event to really, really pile up. And the reason why, if you are in New England and you're on the east, why you want this event to be an overrunning event and not a place where you have a big low is because if you had a big low, let's say, coming up in Pittsburgh, Well, the counterclockwise flow around that low, if you have something in Pittsburgh, is going to take the air, which will be mild down north in the Carolinas and Virginia, and drive it northeastward up the coast and flood New England with warm air, and then that's it, game over, you're raining. Here, you have these little short waves riding along this front from west-southwest to east-northeast, from basically northeast Texas all the way up to what I think will be just south of New England. And instead the low, either short waves, little pieces of energy, or low pressure systems that are so weak that they cannot drive warm air up against the polar vortex. They will drive up a little bit of warm air, which I'll get to in a second, but they cannot just torch the whole atmosphere. So instead, as each of these little pieces of energy comes up and rides along the front, it's just precipitation, 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 precipitation. And with the MJO in phase 8, that will help enhance that precipitation even more. So if you get several of these little events coming over hour after hour after hour after hour, the snow can pile up, particularly on the northern end of that front, and that really may happen in northern Pennsylvania, Hudson Valley, New York, and somewhere around the Mass Pike in southern New England. I think that's where it could really happen, but we'll see how it happens. The models handle this differently. The Euro Euro operational kind of consolidated this energy into a little bit more into one slightly bigger system, not a big load, but big enough to where it warmed up the areas basically along I-80 and even along the south coast of New England and turned them to rain and put the bigger batch of snow further north. If you have less of that, you'll have an even longer duration event because the energy won't be all consolidated in one low. It will be several little pieces of energy that will take longer to pass through, and then you'll have more cold air in place for basically everyone I-80 and I-90, particularly between those two interstates, should just keep getting snow for 24 to 36 hours if you had a situation break out like that, which is more with the Euro ensembles, the GFS, and the Canadian and the Japanese model. All had that solution more like that. And actually, the Euro had a solution like that last night, too. So I think that probably is the more likely solution now, but who knows? We'll see in the next couple of days. But what these shortwaves will do with a little bit of warm air in this overrunning event, and this is going to be particularly a big problem in Arkansas, northern Kentucky, parts of West Virginia, maybe into Maryland, could include Baltimore, D.C., is you're going to get sleet and freezing rain. And that's where that's important because the Arctic air is in place, particularly at the ground level, and as these little shortwaves come up, they'll bring a little bit of warm air just over the top of the southern flank of that Arctic air, and essentially it will fall as rain in those areas, but it will be below freezing at the ground, so you get the freezing rain, and you could have a big ice setup here, particularly because the precipitation may be moderate and not heavy, and lighter to moderate precipitation, when it's freezing rain, accumulates faster, because it has a better chance to stick there and then completely freeze before the next drop hits the area. So it's the same spot. So that could be a nasty ice storm. And in some places in southern Pennsylvania, depending on how things work out, you could have a situation where you get a quarter inch, maybe even a half inch of ice, and then it changes to 4 to 6 inches of snow on top of that, something like that. So that's that's the setup you're looking at. So just thought I'd explain that really quickly. Can't really do it very quickly because it's a complicated setup, but a very interesting setup if you like snow and crazy winter weather. So that's it.